Hey everybody, strap in, settle down, get your goggles on, take your blood pressure. You're about to enter Buck's brain. Okay, so it's a Saturday morning while I'm recording this, and when you're listening to this, try to think back to the last Saturday that you did some yard work, or the last day you did some yard work. Maybe it was hot, maybe it was cold. But usually around this time of year, unless you live in the tropics, and I grew up in Florida, so that kind of counts for me. Usually this time of year, you shift from mowing and weeding and doing different things in your flower bed to the undeniably worst task of all yard work, which is raking leaves. If you have hardwood trees, oaks, or whatever, you'll know that it's an endless task. It just goes on for months. And what's strange is if you look around, some oak trees don't lose their leaves, I don't think, for months. They just drop just enough to make your yard, cover your yard a little bit. And you got to rake every 3 or 4 days. Some lose right away. Like one of my neighbors, it seemed like September 1st, it just had a clock on it or something. It just bam, it all fell out. I'm not exactly sure how that works either. And then you have pine needles, but it's just an endless task and it's backbreaking work. And I don't think anybody really gets excited about it. Like sometimes I get a little excited about doing certain parts of the yard, certain yard projects, but I never wake up every morning saying, "Oh, it's gonna be a great day. I get to rake leaves." So I was out doing some yard work, and I noticed while I was doing my yard work, if you get my drift, I'm doing my yard work, and I look around, and some neighbors are just a little slow at raking their leaves this year, and I get it. It's not everybody does it on the same day, but there was one commonality about some of my neighbors that kind of got on my skin, and I'm not proud of this, but I'm just sharing because this is Buck's brain, and this is where my brain goes. Um, some of my neighbors don't rake up the leaves or the yard debris around the road, around the curb. And I'm not exactly sure why they don't do that. Maybe it's just they don't have time. Maybe it's too much trouble. But it's almost like it's an eyesore because you got a nice yard and then you got all these leaves and pine needles and yard debris right around the road. And then as I was looking closer, I noticed something else. A lot of people don't rake up leaves that are close to the edge of their yard. In other words, if the wind's blowing right to left, well, they're not going to wake those leaves up because in a few hours they're going to be in somebody else's yard and it's not going to be their problem. That kind of got on my skin too because it's like, well, we'll just save it for later, or we'll save it for somebody else to do. And if you're out doing leaves and you're hot and sweaty, the last thing you want to do is rake up somebody else's leaves. So I started thinking about that a little bit more. It's like, what kind of person does that lives in a neighborhood and we're supposed to all be, in this together, this whole unity thing within neighborhoods and, protecting each other and neighborhood watch, blah, blah, blah. Why would somebody do that? Why would they say, I'll leave that for you? And, so I kind of got a little bit, I don't want to say hostile, but it kind of annoyed me because I'm thinking, I take the time to clean up the yard. I clean up the street. I even clean up around the bushes that may get to somebody else, and for somebody not to do that and let their leaves blow into my yard, I mean that's kind of like a neighborhood sin. Maybe we should have a neighborhood meeting, a committee about leaves, and it only happens every October, November time frame. Come April, I don't think we think the same way because everything's blooming, everybody's happy, and it's a nice time in the summer. Everyone's so hot and oppressed. It's a little different atmosphere. But as soon as those leaves stop falling, I think that there's people out there that get a little bit judgmental on why some people don't do it, and I get it, because it is not a fun task. It's not something fun we share. So I started thinking about that a little bit more. Like, why am I the gatekeeper of the neighborhood leaves? Why is it my job to ride around and look and see, okay, who's not raking their leaves today? I mean, I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm not going to leave notes on their front door saying, it's November, it's time to get the rakes out, And then God hit me with this, and it really kind of softened my mood and changed my annoyance. He said, Buck, maybe it's not a priority for them to rake their leaves because they have other priorities in their lives that you don't. In other words, they might have a sick person at home, or they may be too elderly to rake their leaves. Or maybe they have paid somebody to do it because they're really busy people. Maybe they work nights and they don't want to clean up during the day because that's when they sleep and they can't want to be up at night at 2:30 in the morning running the blower, keeping the whole neighborhood up. And so, it started to dawn on me that it's easy for me to cast judgment on people when I'm doing what I think is right, and I look over and say, well, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. Now, I don't know how many times people have looked at me that way. I know that there's been days that my leaves have blown into other people's yards, and I know that there's days that I didn't cut my grass, and maybe that annoyed people to my right or left that have really beautiful yards. And the same can go for other parts of our houses, because they're all kind of connected. If you don't put weed and feed down, if you don't put the right fertilizer down, you're going to spread weeds to your neighbor. Or you might be that person that has that one tree that the leaves fall perfectly on the other side of the fence. And I might be that guy. I don't know it. I don't check to see if I'm ruining somebody else's yard. I only care about my own. And God really, he really got my attention that way. Because if you think about it in terms of all of our lives and what we do during, just our daily lives where we go, we tend to think of things as, how does it affect me? What is it doing to me? And if I'm doing it, you should be able to do it. Well, I don't know how many things that I'm not doing that other people are doing. So here's a couple scriptures I want to share with you. First one comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 10. And Paul says, I appeal to you, brothers, by the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that all of you agree, and there be no division among you, and that you be united in the same mind and the same judgment. And I think what that's telling me is that we all have to agree that we are here for different reasons, and that our judgment, or basically the way we look at things, should be kind of in the same mind or the same likeness, and that be of Christ, of course, would be the best way. But if we think about it in terms of just our neighbors and what we look at, we give people the benefit of the doubt. In other words, they're not out to ruin my yard by not raking their leaves. They're not out to make my house look like trash or our neighborhood look like trash. We give them the benefit of the doubt, saying that maybe they can't do it. And then if you find, other evidence, let's just say later, maybe that's something you deal with. But in church, should we not give people the benefit of the doubt? If they're not supporting us, if they're not, showing up as often, should we just say that there's something going on that's in their lives that's not letting them participate as much? At work, maybe we should give people the benefit of the doubt when, maybe they're a little cranky one day. And that just has to do with unity, saying the same way I judge you, people are going to judge me. So maybe you're that guy one day that needs mercy and grace at work or at church. Maybe you're that guy one day, or that girl one day, when you're really short with your friends and you're ignoring certain people because you got so much going on, and you need their mercy. So never forget that how we are judged, or how we judge others, is the same way people judge us. So before we rush to conclusions about people, maybe we should consider that there's something else that we don't know. We're only seeing the surface, and that's just a good rule of thumb maybe to live by. And the second verse I really like comes from Romans chapter 12, verses 4 and 5. For as in one body we have many members, and the members do not all have the same functions. So we, through many, are one body in Christ, and individual members one of another. In other words, we all perform different tasks. There's not a lot of people in this world that are farmers anymore. It's just maybe out west, in the Midwest states, there's more farmers per square mile maybe than in Georgia. I don't know. I've never really did the research. But the truth be told is, we have people in certain positions that contribute in ways that we don't really know. They're out there somewhere doing it. There's somebody that's raising beef for us to have our hamburgers. There's somebody at the mills making the paper that we write on. Somebody's somewhere is soldering together wires so our computers work. And we all have all these different functions. And what we can't do is say is your function's less important, or you're not doing your function properly, or you're not living up to my expectations of what you should be doing. Now, there are some cases where that's true, that's consistent. We have to be accountable to each other. But in terms of going back to the leaves, maybe somebody isn't as urgent about their yard as me. But maybe if you go into their house, they're really, really cautious of allergies because they have people that are sick there that have medical problems. And so the more yard work they do, the more allergens they bring in. And as a member of the body, I can't say to them, well, you have to deny what's important for you in order for me to get what I need. So maybe just think about that this week. Maybe, as you're driving home right now, or maybe when you're doing your devotions, or maybe when you're thinking of somehow to get closer to God, think about how you can become more unified with the people around you. Give people a break. Walk things back. Don't rush to judgment. Maybe share with them your thoughts on what's hard for you to overcome, and find some commonality that way. Look for ways to bond rather than to separate. Don't look at the neighbor's yard and say, why aren't they doing their part, when they surely can look over at your house and say, well, why does your dog bark at 2 in the morning? Or why does your kids play and their ball always end up in my yard? I mean, there's always a comeback. Look for ways that we can bond and unite. Okay, this is about 10 minutes, not too bad. Leave me a line if you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you want to touch on a certain topic, let me know. I'd be happy to do it. Otherwise, you are through the wormhole, you're out of the black hole. Take off your goggles. You might need to walk around a little bit. Buck's Brain is a pretty intense place to be. And I will hit you back in next week. Have a great weekend. Later.